Thank you, Jared. Okay, I'm going to speak from notes today because I want to make sure all my facts are straight for the news media. But let me start off with something I don't need notes for. Anybody here in favor of auditing the Fed?
Yeah!
Anybody here in favor of ending the Fed?
Yeah!
I want to talk about some reasons why we should consider doing both. I was a chief financial officer in banking for more than a decade. I had a chance to see the shenanigans that go on at the Fed up close. I was invited here for the grand opening of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Charlotte branch, when Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve. As a side note, how many of you realize that Alan Greenspan was once part of the inner circle of Ayn Rand? If anybody can explain how he became the leading central planner and an example of Keynesian economics, the Federal Reserve, please explain that to me.
Corruption, right.
Anyway, back to the story. So I came here for the grand opening, and I think it was in 1990, and Greenspan talked about 5 valuable roles for the Fed. I'll try to say these with a straight face. The first one, managing the nation's money supply. The second one, managing credit conditions. The third one, managing interest rates. The fourth one, managing and regulating banks. The fifth one, managing inflation. If you take the word managing out of those sentences and you put in the word manipulating, you'll get a better idea what the Fed actually does. Let me talk about all 5 of these roles. The first one, manipulating the money supply, means the Fed can create as many dollars as it likes while being accountable to
no one.
Nobody. Do you think the lawyers on Capitol Hill have any idea what goes on inside the Fed? The answer is no. Number 2, manipulating credit conditions. Do you want the Fed or any other government agency determining who is going to get credit and in what amount?
No.
The answer to that one is no. The third one, manipulating interest rates. Interest rates represent the cost of money. The cost of money, like the cost of anything else, should be determined by what? Supply and demand. The cost or price of something allows us to make informed decisions about how we invest our money. Manipulating prices causes malinvestment. A malinvestment such as we saw in the housing market recently. My question here, should the Federal Reserve manipulate interest rates?
No.
The answer is no. The fourth thing that Dr. Greenspan talked about, manipulating and regulating banks. Would you be surprised if I told you banking is heavily regulated? No, you wouldn't. When I was the chief financial officer in banking, I remember dealing with Federal Reserve examiners, FDIC examiners, Comptroller of the Currency examiners, SEC examiners, as well as state examiners. Now my question to you is, did the Fed or any of these other government agencies do anything to prevent the almost complete meltdown in the financial markets a year ago?
No.
The answer again is no. No, they actually encouraged many of the disastrous lending policies. Number 5, the biggest lie of all. They manage inflation. The Fed does not manage inflation. The Fed causes inflation. I'll say that one more time. The Fed does not manage inflation. It causes inflation. Inflation is caused by increasing the money supply. Period. That's the only way to explain that. When we hear about the Fed printing money, and I should say printing in quotes there, they don't actually have to go to the trouble of printing money. They just issue electronic credit. When I was the chief financial officer in banking, I never had to wait for the armored car to arrive with currency. We would just open up our account and the money would magically appear from the Fed. So what they're doing then is they're creating money out of thin air by issuing credit. I was asked a question on my internet radio show that Jared mentioned a few minutes ago. One of my callers asked, is the value of gold going to go up? My answer was no, the value of gold is not going to go up, but it's going to become more expensive. Let me try to explain that. What I'm saying is, if you think about gold, gold has been stable compared to other commodities and prices for hundreds of years. If you compare that with X number of dollars to buy an ounce of gold, which one is going to move in value? Is it the gold or the dollars? It's the dollars. The gold will remain here, the dollars will drop in value. So relatively, yes, in dollar prices, gold costs more. But gold is not becoming more valuable. The dollar is being destroyed by the Fed. It's going to make the dollars less valuable. I have another question for you here. Who owns the Federal Reserve?
International bankers.
Yeah, this one's really tricky, isn't it? All right, let's talk about all the characters involved here. You're getting close.
Warburg!
All right, yeah, you're getting close. The 12 Federal Reserve banks are owned by the major commercial and investment banks. These are the same banks the Fed purports to be regulating. These are the same banks that receive bailouts from your taxpayer dollars. The chairman of the Federal Reserve and the Board of Governors in Washington are appointed by whom? Nope, we got another player here. The President of the United States. When we are told that the Fed is, and I'm quoting from their document, an independent entity within the government. You know that one again? An independent entity within the government. They are an independent of and part of the government entity. That is complete gibberish. That is nonsense. It is meant not to clarify, but to confuse. Okay, so if you think about what's happening here, you're looking at cronyism at its best. The Federal Reserve is in bed with the big banks and the federal government. I agree completely. Where do the Federal Reserve revenues come from? The major source of revenues of the Fed come from the Open Market Committee operation. This is the committee that buys and sells, you guessed it, federal government debt. Somebody else has a vested interest in this. They're called primary dealers. The primary dealers are the anointed money center banks that earn gigantic revenues from marketing this debt. So again, can you see this as an act of cronyism? You've got the federal government, the Federal Reserve acting as its banker, and then the big money center banks all making money off of this.